it is. It's gorgeous. All right. So, and Carrie's saying it's the coldest October 28th here ever, and he's in California.
Oh.
So, all right, switching over to stereo
It's
mix.
gorgeous.
And there I am
All right.
hearing my own
So-
stuff. And Carrie's saying it's the coldest October. Let's see that again. We already heard that once. We don't need to hear it again. All right, so let's see. Where am I at? I'm here, and I need to come to here. Oh, I need to read all the little things. It's always something. And here we go. And now we got us live on. There we go. On us live on Zoom. Everywhere I look, I'm alive. Oh, yay. All right. So good morning, everybody. Good morning, Bruce, and all of us who are here in the Zoom room and all of us who are on Pal Talk. So grateful to have everybody with us today as we're reading this amazing book. Once again, for some of us, first time for maybe others, but it's almost like the first time. Feels like the first time. Yeah, because because as I think I heard Bruce saying, before when I read it was like, oh, this is really an interesting story about how Helen received A Course in Miracles. But now I'm looking at it and going, wow, this is a very amazing story of willingness and resistance and fear and jealousy and I mean all sorts of things that in spite of all of what the world would call Helen's shortcomings or Bill's shortcomings or Ken's shortcomings, the fact is that Jesus chose them all and chose us too to deliver this message, and he didn't see the shortcomings. All he saw was, these are my brothers who are I'm entrusting I'm entrusting with the word that's going to save the world. And however you perceive saving the world, it's still, that's what we're here for. So anyway, love is what we came here for, and I'm hoping everybody on Gather can hear us good. I think so. Anyway, here we are. We're still early on in the book, but we're actually, according to my Kindle, 25% through, and on page 122. I'm not sure if that's true or not because it's not a physical book, but
well, I've got us on page 136 in the printed version of, I'm not sure which edition, but it's one of the earlier editions, I think.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just how it is the difference between the Kindle version and the paper version.
Yeah. Font size and formatting and all that kind of good stuff.
Yeah, which I kind of do a bigger font because my vision is not so hot. So here we are. Excuse me. So we've been reading about all the precursor things that came up before actually she started hearing Jesus' voice, and not really even hearing a voice so much as having a thought implanted into her mind in some way. I mean that even that's kind of not true because we all know it. Helen knew it, she just didn't know she knew it. And so this is just being revealed to her from her own inner self that knew the truth and was willing for some crazy reason. I'm sure she was, she thought it was totally insane. She didn't have a feeling like, oh, I'm so lucky that Jesus is talking to me. The story that I understand is she was not feeling so lucky. In fact, she was feeling pretty put upon in most cases of Jesus, wanting her to spread this word. So it is a lovely thing to see. So do you want to back up a little bit, or is it?
I think where we stopped is actually a pretty good stopping point.
Okay,
Um,
so all right.
but I was just going to comment that we're in Helen's letters to Bill for context for people, and we started chapter 6 last week, and it's a pretty lengthy chapter. It's over 50 pages, so we'll be in chapter 6 a while, unless we really speed read. uh, but yeah, obviously Helen and Bill's relationship is a key portion of the background of the A Course in Miracles, and so that's, I think, why Ken devotes a fair amount for a portion of the book to it. But because it really, the course is really all about relationships, and Helen and Bill's were the archetypal, challenged relationship that we all have with everyone and everything as egos. And so that's where we start out with the ego speaking first and being always wrong, and slowly but surely we learn to pause, even if just momentarily, and begin to listen to the real alternative that's always in our mind that says, well, maybe innocence is really the truth about everyone, not on the level of form, but in eternity. And if that's the case, then why am I getting so upset about things that come and go?
Well, exactly. I mean, that's it's. I think as you go through the course, the year after year after year, that you begin to actually see that these are not just words, but there is an absolute truth, as much as you can understand in the world about our situation, where we are, and what's going on. So, do you want to read?
Sure. So I have us about 2/3 of the way down page 136, and Ken resumes his commentary with, "It is interesting to note here as well that during this period, contrary to her later accounts," and then mine says see above, page 99, which of course is going to be different than in the online version, the Kindle version. "Helen's thoughts about others frequently involve references to past lives, in part influenced by explanations Jesus had given her. Her receptivity to this kind of thinking was set up on one level by Bill's having introduced her to the writings of Edgar Cayce, which are replete with references to reincarnation. In addition, by now Helen most likely had had the series of visions described in chapter 5, which clearly imply reincarnation. We continue with the additional comments bearing on Helen's unforgiveness of S. And S was another person that's just given an initial.
Yeah, he was a friend of Bill, who was very close friend of Bill.
Right, exactly, yes. So now here's Helen's account. "The following crossed my mind at various times throughout the next day without any emotional concomitants at all. I thought of S and the remarks I had made the day before to the effect that he needs my forgiveness very badly, but he'll never get it. He does projection, huh? Can we see that in ourselves? He does not know how to ask for it. I could tell him, but even if he asked right, I would still not give it to him. I meant that. Except for that, I forgot the whole matter at the time. Nothing relevant happened until Bill told me that he was driving out earlier, in brackets, to Watermill, than he had intended, quote, on an impulse, unquote. It occurred to me briefly that S, as always, was interfering at a time when I needed Bill very much. All I thought then was, quote, let him. It's just one more thing, unquote. By the next morning, I was glad that Bill had gone, because I thought he was better off at Watermill, and I was feeling much better. In fact, I was genuinely gentle and quite consciously relieved of an intense hatred of men. I was really constructive when I found he, in brackets Bill, had left a lot of messy things all over the kitchen. I did speak to him about it, but I was not angry. I talked of the matter entirely as a real problem of his, and one which I thought he would be better off working out. He agreed that this was so and did not react with his usual antagonism when this sort of thing occurs. During the morning, S occurred to me again. It seemed to me that he was very anxious to give me a present and wanted particularly to do so on my birthday." And then in parentheses, S actually did mention Bastille Day when I spoke to him over the phone on Friday, but I could hardly hear what he said because there was a lot of noise going on at the time. I did not ask him to repeat it. I don't like talking to him. That's the end of the sentence, or the part in parentheses. This time I thought that he has every reason to want to give me a present on that day, and especially something that goes around the neck. I remembered that when he asked me originally whether I like jade, I told him that I don't, and also that I think it is very unbecoming color to me. He had said that he had a jade necklace he liked and had intended to give it to me from Bill. I answered that I'd prefer something else, or better still, nothing, and repeated that I don't like jade. It struck me at the time that it was odd that he nevertheless did give me the necklace. While I thanked him and assured him that I liked it very much, largely on the grounds of courtesy, in parentheses, I was struck by the fact that he seemed to have forgotten my repeated emphasis on my dislike of jade. That made it an odd present, I thought. I had the beads restrung, but I've never worn them. At first, I tried to return them on various acceptable grounds, but S did not seem to hear. And then there's a footnote on the bottom of the previous page. Helen, incidentally, was almost always socially appropriate, despite her frequent feelings to the contrary. So, well, the disconnect between behavior and emotion.
Yeah,
Yeah.
forgiveness to destroy.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then continuing Helen's account, S may yet try to give me something for the neck that really is beautiful. And then in parentheses, this is not mysterious in itself. Bill told me that S wants to give me the chain. Okay, and then she continues. When I first heard about this, my immediate response was I couldn't take it, to which I silently added, and besides, I wouldn't. Now it occurred to me that this gift is really a rope, which S impelled to give to me, and which he must see me wear. The picture of the rope which crossed my mind was very repellent to me, and I knew that if I should accept it from him, it would represent a symbol that I have forgiven him, which he needs so much. My immediate reaction was one of a refusal to be bribed. I have, incidentally, lost my interest in jewelry rather suddenly. I have plenty and hardly need any more. In fact, I guess I've bought plenty of just about everything. At least she's honest about it, that. Okay. And then in parentheses, she says, when I went shopping on Saturday, I bought a sweater for Bill. Bill, I'll change it if you don't like it, and some caps for Jonathan, in brackets, Louis. I didn't want to buy myself anything. And then concluding her account, she says, returning later to the rope, I thought, but this time it's beautiful. Maybe that makes the difference. This seemed like a happy idea at the time, and I did not think of the matter again. So it sounds like she finally forgave herself for her grievance about the gift.
There seems to be a lot of little forgiveness going on here.
Oh yeah, yeah, and her
her
ambivalence, of course, throughout.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Exactly.
You want to pick up from there, Lynn?
Sure. So she's talking about this. I'm supposing it's she said chain and necklace, and I'm not sure they're both the same thing. If it's the jade necklace or a chain, because it seemed like it might have been beads. Anyway, and I think about a mala. I have a jade mala that I use when I'm doing my practices. And so I would love to have had something like that. But that's, she didn't like jade. Interesting. All right. So
maybe she was just jaded on the idea.
you may have been just jaded. Okay. So I think this is Ken now speaking. These comments would seem to refer to a past life when S had hanged Helen with a rope, in parens, or was a party to such a hanging, in parens. He was now asking for forgiveness by presenting Helen with a beautiful chain, which, quote, makes the difference, unquote. Helen continues, the day was very pleasant, although I did not enjoy the gondoliers. In brackets, Helen loved Gilbert and Sullivan. That must be Ken who put that into brackets. Very much, even though the performance was excellent in many ways. For some reason, I felt impelled to see a number of flaws in it. I woke up suddenly around 5 this morning, experiencing such an intense hatred for S that I had to get up and have coffee and a few cigarettes. It was very hard for me to overcome this and get back to sleep. I even tried to pray, in parens, she says, which I found very embarrassing and hate to admit, end of parens. And then another parens, Jonathan told me that I really am religious and I've always been so actually, and why fight it? It's a good question. End of parens. So then Ken, despite his detachment from much of Helen's life, Louis often demonstrated insightful observations about Helen, such as the above. Helen then returned to S. Okay, and this is Helen's words now. I also could not get away from the idea that he is bringing out the worst in Bill. And then in parens, don't be angry, Bill, but to some extent, I do think that imitating S, which you sometimes do, is not the best use of your relationship. S's triviality, quote unquote, is something he will have to overcome. There are better ways of dealing with depression. End of parens. Okay, so this was Helen just mentioning to Bill. So eventually I went back to sleep and got over my hatred of S to some extent. It was breathtakingly intense while it lasted. So Helen is just like so ambivalent, back and forth and back and forth. But, the fact that she's actually looking at these thoughts and experiencing a desire to not feel that way anymore is pretty important, I think, in her growth and her awakening as well. It's just my thought. Okay, then Ken continues. Helen then tuned in quotes, to a dream Bill was having, which she cleverly interpreted as a play on S's actual name, which meant that she and Bill would be able to get beyond the blockage in their relationship symbolized by S. The letter then continues with an important observation about Helen's and Bill's ability to help each other out, a point which will be returned to many times in these letters, as well in the original as in the original dictation of the course. And so this is Helen once again. Unintentionally, I omitted the thought that neither Jonathan, Louis, nor Chip, Bill's roommate, can help Bill or me very much at the moment, but we can help both of them very much, very much. It will not be reciprocal for some time, but eventually it will be. The two people who are ready to help each other now are Bill and me, but we have to get some things straightened out first. And then Ken continues. Helen followed this with an oblique reference to the photographer of photographs of Mars, and she, in quotes, which I believe are scheduled to be sent back to Earth on July 14th, and that is Helen's birthday. Ken says this portion of the letter then concludes. This is Helen. And now I think this is over, which is just as well because I have a lot of other things to do. I am very grateful that I do not really remember what I wrote and would prefer not to read it. Excuse me. Laughing makes me cough. So it's just so funny how she's like, okay, I wrote it, but I don't want to read it because I don't want to have anything to do with it. It's just so transparent. It's beautiful.
Yeah, and I think that's a precursor to what we all need to become is just really watching our mind, in a consistent basis, and just noticing when we're not at peace, and use that as an impetus to choose the right mind instead of the crazy making mind.
Yeah, which I mean, it's over and over in the book. I mean, the courses, that's a continuous theme throughout the book.
Yeah.
And, she already knew this before she started getting the dictation. So this is just a continuation of her own.
Yeah.
Her own awakening, whatever.
It's
So
pretty
do you
evident,
want
isn't it, reading this?
yeah, I'm going to let you read on so I don't cough.
Okay. So, and okay, now Ken continues. There was probably a pause here in Helen's writing, but then the letter continues, now addressed directly to Bill. And then Helen says, Bill, I'm really sorry I got you into this whole mess, even though I'm nasty enough to say, quote, you started it, unquote. Well, maybe it'll turn out for the best, says who. Please regard this as the effort of a lifetime, although I'm really better at writing research designs and certainly much safer with much italicized. It is my conviction that no man ever loved me, though a lot of them have wanted this or that from me. Since I am so giving, sweet, and generally lovable, in parentheses, hiss, uh, recognizing her serpentine mind, I guess. They generally get very fond of me. Irresistible, that's me, except that I am now 1,000,000 years old and this worries me. I am very jealous of anybody who loves me. I think they're supposed to love me. Being quite aware of this, I have been very careful not to hurt people and have actually done a great deal to be objective with the many people who have confided their love problems to me and asked for help. Most of them, I'm glad to say, have turned out rather well. I only get mad every time. Oh, so only I get mad every time. But that is a private matter, and I really don't let it interfere with what I either say or do. Well, she's open book here. At least she's able to look in her mind and see pretty clearly, what's going on there. Huh?
Yeah, it's pretty crazy, actually.
Even if she doesn't seem to be willing to help herself to change it. Now, I think that's what why the course came along.
Yeah, exactly.
Shall I continue, or do you want to continue?
Yeah, why don't you continue?
Okay, so Ken resumes with this commentary. We have already noted this aspect of Helen's ego personality, which believed that she must sacrifice her own happiness in the process of helping others. On a deeper level, her commitment to Jesus made it impossible for her not to help those in trouble. And so she continually found herself in conflict with her capital S, uppercase S, self, unable not to extend the loving will of her Lord, and yet unable to accept that love for her personal self. We shall discuss this issue again in part 3. The following comments on a dream, quote, from which I never recovered, unquote, are extremely interesting and relate to a, now he jumps from there to Helen's account, green and red rubber ball, which showed up in so many dreams all by itself until I finally tracked it down in a dream from which I never recovered. It was in the crib at the foot, and my father came into the doorway, and I was lying very happily thinking how pretty I was and how warm. He just stayed there and looked and didn't come in. And I was very little, and so I couldn't get up myself and go over. In the dream, I saw myself turn from a very pretty little girl into a very ugly one, and he just looked and then it went away. So I did turn into a very ugly girl. I was fat and horrible, and all the boys turned me down. My mother said I looked like an elephant, and she couldn't stand it.
That's horrible.
Well, if you think about it, I mean, there's the two self-assessments that are epitomized by, like in lesson 93. I think I'm the home of evil, darkness, and sin is the opening line of the workbook lesson, whose title is, light and peace and joy abide in me, right? So, well,
Yeah.
there's the two thought systems spelled out pretty plainly, and that's, her beautiful and ugly selves, which of course has nothing to do with form, and it really has to do with the beauty and the ugliness of the thought systems that are interpreting what is intrinsically neutral, right?
Yes,
I can remember
exactly.
that. Yeah, the pixels that reach our eyes from our screens, and impinge on our retinas. Um, you know, all the little nerve impulses that hit the back of our eyeballs and get converted into electrical impulses in the brain. Yeah, they're pretty neutral. but boy, are we sure talented in ascribing meaning to all those things. And we're convinced that our meaning is what makes it is, right? And
Yeah, and it's so funny because, here she's recounting a story of when she was a baby and she's seen it as a dream. But the
Mhm,
fact that her father just stood and looked at her and didn't come in, talk to her, cuddle her, tell her he loved her, tell her she was beautiful. Her mind turned from I'm beautiful to I am ugly.
mhm.
And that little shift, which her father was probably not anything like that. Her father was like, I'm just looking at my baby, and, then went about his business. And she interpreted his actions
Mhm.
as rejection and
Yeah.
saw it as being something that made her uh hate herself. And then she became what she hated, fat and ugly.
So special love turns quickly, oftentimes from to special hate, and it's really just our incorrect assessment, because we've given meaning to what's meaningless in order to stay a separate self, because we think there's some value in that. Our most hidden secret treasure is the idea that our individuality has something to offer us, even though we know is came at the expense of murdering perfect oneness. So we think, dividing what is indivisible into separate parts, and then we populate a world with it in our minds, and we call it space-time.
Yeah, yeah. And we give it all sorts of meanings,
Mm-hmm.
make up all sorts of stories.
Yep.
And and I mean, this is something I learned, from Choose Again with Diedrich Walsack, and it's kind of a work extension of the work of Jerry Delpolsky.
Uh-huh.
And how when we're children, when we're small, and even older, that we interpret what others say or do as being a reflection of what we are. And so, if you have, if every time you see a Christmas ball that's red and green, you relate it to when my father rejected me and I became a horrific creature, then you're going to hate Christmas. Or, I mean, I'm just making up a story here. Um, or you're going to feel guilty every time you see something like that. And, because you think it has something to do with what you are. But in reality, it's the interpretation of what you are based on what, you discern from things around you. And if you, went back to it and said, Helen, what did that have to do with you? Your father standing there looking at you. What did he really hate you? Was he really not wanting to love you? What is it that really happened? Because he was probably just admiring his beautiful child, and you interpret it as rejection. And your whole life now you felt rejected by men because that particular thing happened. And if you could just see that it was really love, then maybe you could change your point of view about yourself and recognize that whatever somebody else does or says has no, it doesn't reflect anything about you at all.
Mm-hmm.
That's the psychology of it is so transparent once you see it. But if you're in the situation where you think you're the victim of it, you're always going to feel victimized
Right. Right.
until you get
And,
over
and
that.
that's and that's the ego's bread and butter. I mean, victimhood says, yes, I exist, and I'm separate from everything and everyone else, including my parents, my family, everyone that I can think of or imagine. I'm separate, and especially from my creator.
Yeah,
And the intolerable guilt over that um, imagined impossible crime um, is so intense that we had to make up an entire world, not just the planet Earth, but the whole pan galactic cosmos of of space and time, from quarks to quasars. And it's like, okay, here it is. Here's my dream. And now I'm safe from oneness because I have this dualistic identity that seems to be keeping me safe from peace. Which, when you phrase it that way, it's like, what? Why would I do that?
Why would I want that?
Yeah.
But you can see why you would want it, because then it makes you right about your
Hmm.
your beliefs.
We'd rather be right than happy. Yeah, as egos.
Oh my gosh, yeah. So you want me to read on?
Sure.
Okay. So many years later, Helen spoke with me. This is Ken speaking now. Many years later, Helen spoke with me about her father and the green and red ball, but said that it was a memory of an actual event, not a dream. This is interesting, given that Helen would have had to have been considerably less than a year old when the quote event unquote occurred. In Helen's recalling this quote unquote event to me, she described the cold objectivity of her father. At any rate, whether a memory or a dream, the experience certainly reflects Helen's rather bitter perception of her father's aloofness from her. The letter then seemed to conclude, this is Helen, you just called. Since you know it from then on, I won't repeat it. Sleep well. Love, Helen. So then Ken continues. There was a break here, but then another letter follows, also in page sequence. Evidently, Helen wrote these while Bill was away, and then either sent them to him altogether or more likely gave them to him when he returned. Thus, these were more like Helen's own particular form of journal notes. That's what I was just thinking. The next entry begins. Okay, this is Helen writing to Bill. Dear Bill, I am so glad you called when you did. It's frightening how much can happen to me that I don't even notice. So I tried to pray, and in parents, really. And I think I did for just a very little while. I can't get over how hard it is for me. I asked him, Jesus, in brackets, can put that in. I asked him to get me back on the ladder and meant it, but it didn't last. I don't generally kneel, but because I think it's a silly position, it makes you look ridiculous. But I did try, and I started to cry. And then in parens, which I seem to be doing a lot of, end parens, but it wasn't bad. When I got up, I rather unexpectedly said out loud, and thank you very much for letting me try again after all. And then in parens, she says, I guess it should be a capital Y, end of parens, which, I mean, that reflects Kellen's idea that anything that has to do with the divine should be capitalized. So, okay, so then she continues. I intended to say a prayer for my mother as you suggested, and I started to, but it came out a bit different. What I think I said was, quote, please don't let me ever hurt anybody living or dead, end quote. There was a slight break and it ended, quote, in the past or the present or in the future, end quote. I meant it. And wow, that's very cool too. I mean, there's some heavy course principles in this one little letter here about forgiving the past and the present and the future.
Mm-hmm.
And don't let me hurt anybody living or dead. That is a reference really to the the mention of time, or the notion of time in the course. And then also when she was praying, she asked Jesus to help her get back on the ladder, which,
Mm-hmm.
as we know, the ladder of prayer is a very important concept in the course also. So, these things were in her mind,
Yeah.
this whole time.
Yeah. The sentence that kind of grabbed me is, and thank you very much for letting me try again after all. And I was thinking, well, that's really forgiving ourselves for our resistance. And so here's an early instance of where Helen's recognizing, maybe more or less consciously, her own resistance, and how we all have this enormous resistance. And I think it was lesson 95 in the workbook where Ken says that, kind of Jesus departs from the usual format and says, well, we must be really patient with ourselves for our lapses in diligence. I'm paraphrasing as usual, but just because it's not about, we're not going to get graded. It's really just a matter of or rated, or it's not an evaluative process, because our inheritance is guaranteed by our Creator, and we don't have to prove anything or to demonstrate to anyone but ourselves that we're willing to accept our real identity and reject the one we made, not forcefully or violently. We don't have to fight it. And of course, chapter 30, right before the rules for decision, says, "Do not fight yourself." But we all put up an enormous fight typically to that idea, and so here's an early mention of how she's, what appears to be anyway, a moment of self-forgiveness, of saying, basically projecting onto Jesus, would you forgive me for, and letting me try it again, kind of thing.
Yeah, again, there's another example of something that's prevalent in the course, the idea that you can choose again.
Over and over and over until it finally sticks, until we're finally done with beating the ego's dead horse of a thought system.
Exactly. This is pretty profound. Of course, I never caught this the first time I read this.
No. I mean, I remember, letting some of it in, but just so much more doing this reading. I think reading it aloud really helps too, doesn't it, Lynn?
It does. It helps a lot, reading and listening and the whole thing. It's all good for, and of course, our knowledge of the course is a lot greater now.
Yeah.
And
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
we're
Probably
more,
hundreds, if not thousands, of years of listening to Ken between now and the first reading, give or take. Yeah.
oh yeah, gosh, no kidding, man. We listen to Ken every day, and what a bright star.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm going to continue Ken's writing. The sincerity of Helen's feelings here are obvious. A part of her never wished to hurt anyone, and that was again expressed in her willingness to be of help to anyone who needed it, regardless of her negative feelings about the person or her experience of imposition. The love of her priestess self was thus able to be released. Helen then reflects her acceptance of the joining that was the meaning of her and Bill's relationship, as well as her directly urging Bill to change his mind. And then this is a continuing of Helen's letter. Bill, I am happy about one thing. Very happy, I think. It's nice to do things together because we are supposed to be like that. If you build up your faith, and in parens, she says, which was very lacking, by the way, end of parens. She always has to throw a little thing in there. If you build up your faith, you must come out of suspension. Maybe that's all you have to do, because if you start with that, you won't have to go through all this mess to get it. I have always been characterized by a marked tendency to start at the end and work my way back to the beginning, sometimes getting balled up around the middle. This is not the easy way, believe me, and probably never was necessary. But some of us don't appreciate the value of a straight line being the shortest distance between 2 points. But it is. This is so profound. She continues, I have to stop smoking without a holder. I was surprised that for some reason I have been smoking without it for a long time now. In parens 2 weeks or so, end of parens, and it didn't hurt my eyes a bit. Quote, in parens, really in parens. But the idea was wrong. You're not supposed to use power that way. It's a misuse of what may be a better kind of immortality. Love, Helen. Wow. So now she's talking about smoking with a holder, which was quite fashionable. And apparently she did it because the smoke got in her eyes. But now she's been smoking for a couple weeks without it, and it didn't hurt her eyes. But the idea was wrong. You're not supposed to use power that way. It's a misuse of what may be a better kind of immortality. And so she's equating her ability to smoke without the smoke bothering her eyes as a power, as somehow, something that is beyond normal or paranormal or whatever. I don't know. I just find that interesting. And uh, I mean, just the idea of Helen smoking kind of blows me away.
I was just thinking about that, was a 50s or 60s song, Smoke Gets in Your Eyes. And then I was thinking about what a great symbol for, a cigarette smoke being, blinding ourselves, or at least obscuring and distorting things, when the smoke in front of our eyes, clouds our vision, literally as well as figuratively. When we basically are using something as a mechanism to hide from an undistorted image.
Wow, interesting. You brought up that song, and I was thinking about that. Yeah, I wondered what the heck smoke gets in your eyes. I have to go back and listen to it because I only know the first couple lines of it are "You asked me how I knew our true love was true," and
Oh yeah. I hadn't thought of the rest of the lyrics, but yeah.
but I can smoke
I'd
without
have
getting
to
sick.
I'd have to look at that too. Yeah.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see. I'm not going to do it right now, but it's certainly an interesting point, and it
Well,
was
the whole
not. Well,
the whole thought system of sin, guilt, and fear is what really metaphorically gets in our eyes, right?
yeah, exactly. So, and I love that she says, some of us don't appreciate the value of a straight line being the shortest distance between 2 points, but it is. And so she's seeing, I try to avoid getting to the end because, I, diddle around in the middle too much.
Yeah. And as you're reading that, I'm thinking, well, from a mathematical geometric perspective, that's true in Euclidean spaces, but in non-Euclidean geometries, that's not always true.
Yeah. In fact, in reality, it's not true at all, is it?
Exactly. Yeah. The shortest distance between 2 points is zero because time and space don't exist, right? In
Exactly.
truth, yeah,
It's all the same.
that's how
Oh,
quantum entanglement works, right?
that's hilarious. Of course, she didn't know that, but
Well,
something in her did. Yeah,
her scribing certainly predates a lot of the more recent advancements in modern physics, anyway.
that's crazy. Yeah, yeah. So let me continue. Ken says the last comment coming early in the summer of 1965 foreshadows Helen's cave vision, wherein she vowed not to misuse her mind's power. Helen, incidentally, was a chain smoker, averaging about 4 packs a day until she almost choked to death while on a trip sometime during the scribing of the course. And boy, think about 4 packs a day. You know how much a pack of cigarettes is now? It's like about $10. So that, but they were probably 25 cents back then. I remember I used to, my dad smoked, so I used to have, you could just go to the store and buy a pack of cigarettes if you were 6 years old, if you had a quarter.
Yeah, I remember it being pretty cheap too from that
Yeah.
era. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah. I have a story about me and my girlfriends, and we all each got $1, and we went to the store and bought a bunch of penny candy, which really was a penny, and we bought cigars, and then we went and ate up a bunch of candy and smoked those. We were trying to smoke those cigars, and we all got very, very sick. It was horrible, and
And then
that's
there's
where
then there's when the attempt to combine the two with the candy cigarettes, which I probably ate around Halloween, come to think of it. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, you can still actually buy candy cigarettes, believe it or not. Uh, that's hilarious too. Anyway, so continuing. So she almost choked to death during the scribing of the course. She gave up her habit right then and there and never touched another cigarette. Wow, from a 4 pack a day to nothing. Note also Helen's reference to her concern for her eyes, an important theme we shall return to presently. Finally, this passage refers to what Jesus would later describe in text chapter 1, section 1, um, as the error of confusing the levels of the mind and body. Sickness comes from the level of the mind, though frequently manifest on the bodily level. And healing, therefore, can come only by changing one's mind. Altering one's physical level, as in Helen's using or not using a cigarette holder, in order to affect a symptom cure constitutes magic. You're not supposed to use power that way. That was a quote. You're not supposed to use power that way. This can continue. This is not evil or sinful in and of itself. And he refers to text chapter 2, section 4, 2444. So we'll look that up. But if taken seriously, the magic can lead to the aforementioned confusion of levels, thus hindering the true healing that results only from forgiveness, the whole point of the course. And that this idea of level confusion, I just want to stop a minute and discuss that a little bit, because I do see it in myself all the time, and I also see it in other course teachers. And so, course, a lot of times course teachers will think that, if I heal my thoughts about this thing, that my cancer will go away. Or if I heal my thoughts about that thing, my eye will be returned. And I've had people actually tell me, because, I'm blind in my right eye. I've heard people tell me, well, if you just healed your mind about that, then your vision would come back in your eye. And, that is absolutely level confusion, because I don't have vision in either eyes for real. There's no vision in the body or in the world. And so vision has something to do with a reality that is not, excuse me, that's not evident here in my world. And so it's, like I said, it's level confusion to think that if you change your mind about things, that it's going to actually change the physical manifestation in the world, because that's not real. The only thing that actually changes is the reality, not the reality, but your experience of reality. And then you don't rely on the body for your existence. And Jesus proved that quite handily by the crucifixion, if nothing else, of all the things that he did during his little life here on the earth, to show us that what you are is not this thing that seems to represent you.
Mm-hmm.
And but yet, still I always hear course teachers and students talking about healing the body by healing the mind. And the healing of the body is the recognition that the body, at, at not one instant does the body actually exist.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, if there is no world, and that's the central thought the Course attempts to teach, then any specific body within that world has to be a misunderstanding, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just, it is an illusion. And, you say it's an illusion, and people think, well, that you're not confronting the reality of it. Well, no, you actually are confronting the reality of it, because you're recognizing that only illusion, it is a persistent one. It's something that you will consider, you will see and experience, as long as you experience yourself as being something outside of God.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, that whole idea of level confusion, I think, kind of, and what you're just sharing reminds me of something that I'm going to put in the chat. That we had a question in a study group, an online study group, a couple of days ago that I thought was a really good question. And this particular person asked, well, when you say it didn't happen, that can be a spiritual bypass if it basically isn't accompanied with the understanding that what didn't happen really is the ego's interpretation of everything. Now, in fact, the Course says, and even though the material universe as we perceive it, which is an interpretation, is it's just it's a misinterpretation. If we deprive ourselves of what the world seems to be showing us, we're denying the classroom for the Holy Spirit, as well as really reinforcing the ego's belief system. of denial and its tactic of denial. So anyway, I put this is something that our mutual friend Dave and I were in this group, and we kind of wordsmithed in response to this question of like, well, isn't saying it didn't happen? Can't that be an unhelpful response? And I think in the course's jargon, it's probably better to say it's the ego's interpretation, it's condemning judgments that didn't happen. And the corruption and murder by the ego of love and innocence, which is everyone's birthright inheritance, that corruption and murder didn't happen. And so it's not like the physical events that we perceive with our senses, which are intrinsically neutral, didn't happen, because I think that's why the course says it's a particularly unworthy form of denial, right?
Right. I mean, it's like you're watching a movie and then at the end saying, well, I didn't see that.
Right. Yeah. Or the cliche of when you find yourself in hell, you say it's not hot and I'm not here,
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
that's basically, ego loves that, because it's basically saying, well, as long as I keep denying my experience, there's a part of my mind that knows very well that that's what I am identifying with. And the denial basically reinforces the fraudulent dualistic idea, right? An identity.
Right. And instead, we shouldn't be in denying our experience. We should be asking the question, what is this for?
Right. And how would the Holy Spirit see this? And the Holy Spirit sees the neutrality of anything specific. And so the special love and special hate come to the surface as the misinterpretations of everything. And that becomes our classroom of forgiving ourselves for wanting to distort what's intrinsically neutral, right?
Exactly. And then you don't feel guilty about wanting that. You just recognize that it was foolish. It's just like, I don't feel guilty for wanting to eat a whole birthday cake by myself. But if I ate the whole birthday cake by myself, I would regret it later. So, that's a cause and effect I can understand. That's
Sure.
but the fact is there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing nothing to feel guilty about. It's just, it's a mistake. And
Yeah. A forgivable misunderstanding. And
yes,
yeah, it's as I love how Kim Upnick always says, it's not evil, sinful, or wicked, it's just silly.
yes,
And it's like, trying to get to some place, and then you take a wrong turn and find yourself in a cul-de-sac, and the thing to do is turn around in that cul-de-sac and get back on the where you left off, and let the inner GPS, aka Holy Spirit, get you back on course. But so often, we get on this little Gilligan's Island 3-hour tour, which is probably equivalent to countless lifetimes that we've spent in the dream of space-time and individuality, and certainly ego's whole thought system of sin, guilt, and fear, and thinking, well, this is where I'm stuck. No, we're just in an extended cul-de-sac dream that we can easily rectify by listening to Holy Spirit's guidance and
exactly.
locking onto that inner GPS signal.
Yep, and hear that little voice that says, recalculating.
Exactly. Yeah. Rethinking, choosing once again.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
All
Should we
right.
finish up the last little bit of letter one, and then
Yeah.
we
You
can
want me
save
to?
letter two for next week?
Yeah, we'll do that.
Okay. All
Okay.
right.
So Helen then added the following. I would prefer not to add this, but I guess I should. I am saying this in a very small voice, really a whisper, in the hope that you can't hear it. And then in parens, there seems to be a slight case of synesthesia here. In parens. You're right, Bill. There is no sense in saying God is on my side. You have to say, I am on his.
Well, that's really insightful, isn't it?
It is, my
It's
goodness.
sort of like the equivalent of something in one of our study groups someone mentioned. I'm not sure where it came from, where to attribute it to. But I think it's really a witty and accurate statement. Is, if God seems far away, guess who moved?
Exactly. So yeah, and recap. calculating.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's see, is there more? Okay, I'll just finish this last paragraph then. This, of course, looks forward to that most important theme in A Course in Miracles of bringing the darkness to the light, not the light to the darkness. And we've been talking about that quite a bit lately in our
Mm-hmm.
groups for sure. We must come to where God is by changing our minds about Him, not demanding that He join us in our deluded minds. We join Him.
Yep.
Bookmark there. And yeah, and I mean, there's some place in the course, there's probably more than one, there's many, that say, don't tell God how to answer your prayers. Don't say to God, if you love me, you will give me this, or if you're really there, this will happen, because you're going to be disappointed every single time.
Mm-hmm.
God is not there to take our direction or requests.
Nope. Nope. Not at all.
just
Not at all.
just and if we go and we bring the darkness to Him, then we can be healed. And that's
Yeah,
a gift.
indeed. I thought I'd just mention real quick in the last few seconds here of our weekly conversation that I had a really fun and interesting, thoughtful conversation with Stefan Bowles, who's a course teacher who studied with Ken extensively, including Dave, extended period at Roscoe, New York. And he has a wonderful YouTube channel with lots of great content, hundreds of videos. I think I've only listened to a few of them, but the ones I've heard are just fabulous. Anyway, if you go to acimblog.com, it's right now at the top of the list of posts and recent posts. And yeah, I think you might enjoy it. So anyway,
I think you
then I've got
would.
other posts with Gary and Cindy, Lauren Renard, and Leon Joel Russell, and then another one with Susan Dugan that I'll try to get all put together in the next few days too. That up on the
You
website
are
as
just
well.
such a powerhouse of information and teaching. It's wonderful, Bruce, and I so appreciate you. And just
Well, it's
to
so mutual. I know how much you do too, and it's extensive. And even though I'm only witnessing the tip of the iceberg on Saturday mornings, but you do a lot.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's pretty crazy when I think about it. It's like I have a full-time job and time and a half. And also wanted to mention Dove Fishman was on with Tam Morgan and
I
Cindy.
enjoyed that. Yes, yes. Hi, Dev. You just joined us.
Yeah, that was just awesome. It
Yeah,
was
that
such
was real.
a great talk, and so I'm very, very grateful for. I mean, our connections. Our connections are uh, so beautiful, and it's just wow. I'm the luckiest girl in the world. Honestly, I see it that way. Like, oh my goodness, how lucky I am to have joined with this group and
Yeah,
to know these people. It's just, such a joyful thing. So
yeah.
thank you so much, Bruce. And
Likewise. Have a great week, all.
all right, I love you, brother. Look
Thanks.
forward to seeing
I'm the
you next week.
luckiest girl in the world.
That's right. I am. All right, I'm going to
Bye
stop.
for now. Thanks.